Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another session of Ask Dr. Saleem. In this session, for those of you who are here or who are familiar, and those of you who are new, we take questions that we couldn't take during the other sessions. So you may bring questions from other sessions or general curiosity questions that you might have regarding Islam, Hadith, Quran, and so on. And you may ask them in either Urdu or English. However, the answers will be primarily given in English so that we can reach a wider array of audience. However, if you would like to request your answers to be in Urdu, please do so. And with that, if you have any questions, raise your hand. If you'd like to remain anonymous, you can send them directly to me in the chat, or otherwise, if you have mic issues, you could also just post your questions in the chat. To raise your hands, you go through the reactions button and then click on raise hand. And so with that, we'll start with our first question of the day. So this question comes from the chat, and it asks, इमाम इब्न क़य्यम ने ज़ाद अल-मआद में कहा है, गर्दन की मसाह की कोई हदीथ नहीं, गर्दन की मसाह में सिरे से कोई हदीथ साबित नहीं. And then इमाम इब्न तैमिया रहमहुल्लाह अल-फतावा में कहते हैं, नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने से ये हदीथ साबित नहीं कि आपने अपने वुदू में गर्दन का मसाह किया हो, नहीं किसी सहीह hadith में इसका रवायत है. So, Dr. Saleem, can you please clarify गर्दन की मसाह के करने के rulings?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, as far as the answer is concerned regarding the masa of the neck, which is wiping of the neck during wuzu, we need to go back to the basics, and those basics are mentioned in the Quran. The Quran has clearly outlined the whole procedure of wuzu. And one part of that procedure is that it says, Wamsahu birusikum, that you do masa of your head. So ru'us is the plural of ra's, and ra's is head. The difference of opinion has arisen because scholars have opined variously regarding whether the neck is part of the head or not. So this is how it has taken shape, that there are scholars who think that since neck is just below the head, and the head is just adjacent to the neck, so when you do the masa of the head, your ears, of course, are included because they form, they are right in the part of the face. But the thing is whether your neck comes into that or not. So personally, I think that it does not come into the thing that we call as a face. I mean, the limb that we identify as a face is just the face, and the neck is something which is adjacent to it. So my take here would be that yes, wiping the head does not include the neck.
Thank you for that, Dr. Saleem. I would like to remind all the participants that questions are taken in the order that they are received and that they appear on my screen, so I cannot accommodate taking some people before the others. We'll be going in turns, and we'll be taking only one question per participant. So please limit yourself to one question so that we can get through everyone. Rafia Khwaja, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Dr. Shehzad, as you know, recently there was a harrowing incident in Lahore where a woman was attacked by a mob of men for wearing a dress with some Arabic words, which they mistakenly took as Quranic ayats. And she was saved, her life was saved by a very brave police woman. What I want to know, are there any blasphemy laws in Islam? And if they are not, when the police tried to register a case against the culprit, there was acute resistance from certain religious quarters against this. Could you be able to explain this, what happened and why did this happen?
I think, as you would be knowing this, that the only explanation that I can think of is gross ignorance. I mean, it's like gross ignorance, and as we know that mobs, they go violent, and the reason that they go violent is that at times they don't understand the rulings of religion, and whatever they hear from the pulpit or from the mosques and whatever their religious pundits tell them, they just blindly follow them. As far as that incident is concerned, it indeed was harrowing, and thank God that that lady's life was saved by a timely and courageous action by that woman ASP. But the thing is that we have to understand that in this regard, our mob mentality has to be checked and controlled, and this can only be done by educating people, by telling them that whatever crime a person may commit, whatever, I mean, even for example, just for the sake of discussion, let us assume that she was guilty of blasphemy. Let us assume, whereas of course she was not. Even then, no one is given the authority to take the law in his or her hands. The only true way to report a crime is not to punish it, but to, I mean, the only way to check a crime, I'm sorry, is not to punish it, but to report it to the authorities. So if people thought that she was doing something evil or something bad, they had absolutely no authority to even touch her. So let alone the fact, and as we came to know later, that she was not even doing anything wrong. She was totally innocent, and she was charged as if she was guilty. So basically, what we have to understand is that the law cannot be taken into the hands of any group of people. This in itself is lawlessness. This in itself is anarchy, and people who are guilty of this must be punished as anarchists. Let me give you an example from the life of the Prophet, which tells us how important for him it was that he advised all of his followers that we have to follow the law. Whatever thing you witness, whatever crime you witness, whether you like it or not, you have to report it to the law. So this is a very famous incident which is recorded in Hadith books, authentically reported. It is said that one of the companions of the Prophet once came to him and hypothetically asked a question. That he said that, well, if I see my wife in a compromising situation with some man, should I not chop off the head of that man? The Prophet remained silent. And the man insisted, and he asked the question again. The Prophet once again remained silent. He asked a third time. The Prophet became angry and he said, Ana aghyaru minka wallahu aghyaru minni. I'm more honorable than you, and God is even more honorable than me. The law shall take its course. Which means that even if you see your wife, which is of course something that people cannot tolerate, if you see your wife with someone, even then you cannot do anything but to report the crime. So you see, such is the importance of law and order. But in this case, not only was the law and order flouted, secondly, I mean, even if it is reported as a crime, we can clearly see that it was in fact nothing, I mean, wrong that was done on her part. She was just wearing some clothes which had some Arabic words written on them, and they were perfectly fine, and people mistook them. So whether you do this by mistake, or whether she was actually guilty of something, I'm just disregarding that. What I'm saying is, whatever thing that you witness and you think that it is wrongly done, or it's a crime, it's a misconduct on the part of the person, you cannot touch that person. You have to report the misdemeanor on the part of that person to the police authorities, and then they have to take action.
But Dr. Shehzad, are there any laws in Islam regarding blasphemy?
So the next part I was trying to explain as well, that as far as the laws of blasphemy are concerned, these are again interpretations of certain verses of the Quran and certain actions or certain happenings and incidents which took place in the life of the Prophet. If you're talking about Pakistan, yes, we have a law of blasphemy in force, and that law, in fact, is a clear violation of the Sharia itself. And that is another detailed issue that we can discuss sometime. But Islam has not legislated any law for blasphemy. I mean, there's not a single law directly mentioned in the Quran which legislates for blasphemy. Yes, laws can be enacted to protect the honor and integrity of venerable personalities. So prophets of God and other venerable personalities, they must be held sacred, and anyone who misuses them can be punished. But first of all, there is not a single verse in the Quran which says that such a punishment is to be dealt with a capital punishment, or people have to be put to death. Yes, some penalty can be imposed if that too is proven. I mean, proven. And the second thing is that the person insists on his or her crime, then of course action will be taken. If something is done inadvertently, or a person repents, then no action is I mean, the authorities are authorized to take no action, or maybe impose a little penalty. But as far as going as far as to take the life of a person is concerned, this is nowhere mentioned in the Quran.
But they stopped the police from arresting them, the Malvis.
Yes, that is I think that is something else, because they wanted action to be taken by themselves. I mean, they wanted the retribution or the punishment part. This is what I can best think of, that if they stopped the police, it was because they wanted to assume the role of the police themselves.
Thank you so much. Sorry, Mariam, I took so long.
No worries. If you have other follow-up questions, just raise your hand again. Ahmed, please go ahead. You're up next.
Sir, thank you so much. सर मेरा क्वेश्चन एक्चुअली ये था कि गामदी साहब ने हदीस अम्मार के हवाले से ये बयान किया था कि हदीस अम्मार को एज अ दलील जो है वो सबसे पहला पेश करने का जो हक था वो हजरत अली के पास था। और मजीद गांधी साहब ने ये बयान किया था कि हजरत अली ने कहीं भी हदीस अम्मार को एज अ दलील जो है पेश नहीं किया, और ना ही हजरत मुआविया के लश्कर को डिक्लेयर किया एज अ बागी जमात। तो लेकिन इस पर मैंने बाकी उलमा किराम की तहकीकात जब पढ़ी तो मुझे कुछ रवायात देखने को मिली, और बिलखुसूस मुस्नद अहमद में से और अल मुस्तदरक अल हाकिम में से, तो वहाँ पर बाकायदा हजरत मुआविया की खिदमत में अमर बिन आस ने यही हदीस अम्मार कोट किया और ये बताया कि नबी इस्लाम ने तो ये कहा है कि अम्मार को एक बागी गिरोह कत्ल करेगा। तो उसके बाद हजरत मुआविया ने जो है गुस्से में आकर ये कहा कि हमने हजरत अम्मार को कत्ल नहीं किया, बल्कि हजरत अली ने जो है हमारे सामने, हमारे नेज़ू के सामने हजरत अम्मार बिन यासिर को पेश किया। तो उन्होंने इस तरह से उस हदीस की तावील पेश की। तो इस हदीस के पढ़ने के बाद तो हजरत गामदी साहब की तो ये बात ज़ईफ़ हो जाती है ना, कि गामदी साहब ने जो ये कहा कि हजरत मुआविया की खिदमत, हजरत किसी साहबी ने इस रवायत को दलील नहीं बनाया। तो इस पर आपका क्या ओपिनियन है?
So, personally, I haven't formed any opinion as yet on this whole issue. I have yet to take up study seriously on this issue. I mean, I do have perfunctory and some basic knowledge of the fact, but to go as far as to give an opinion, I have yet to form an opinion. So I would excuse myself from answering this question.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Baran Nashur, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sir, my question is about the concept of dua, because we all know that dua is a form of worship and ibadat, but there was this one quote from Umar ibn al-Khattab where he said that I'm not concerned about if my dua gets answered or not, but if I'm able to make dua or not, because if I'm able to make dua, then I know God will answer me. And people say this is like if you are able to make dua for something, then God wants to give you because he inspires you to make that dua. Is this like true?
There are a couple of things regarding dua which we need to understand. First of all, you see, dua or supplication is an expression of our relationship with God. So basically, it is said that dua itself is a form of worship. Ad-dua mukhul ibadah. It's the crux of worship. Ad-dua huwal ibadah. It is the prayer. It is the dua which is in itself an expression of worship. This is because when we do this dua, we are reposing and placing our trust in God. Whether it is accepted or not, that is another thing. But it is our expression that only God can accept our prayers, only he can listen to us. So basically, our own direction towards God is strengthened when we do dua. Now, as far as the realization of dua is concerned, whether it's going to be heard by the Almighty or not, a couple of things again might need to be understood here. First of all, dua will only work when the person who is doing dua, if he's asking something for himself or if he's asking something for someone else, then the needful must be done either by him or that person. For example, if you're praying for success in your, let's say, exams, and you've not done sufficient hard work, then the Almighty, might not listen. Yes, at times things do happen, flukes do happen, but in a normal situation, if you've not worked hard, you're not going to pass. And such a situation, if you blame the Almighty that He didn't listen to my dua, then it would be unfair. So the first step towards dua is that you must do whatever is required of you to do, whether it's you yourself or whether it's someone else. You have to see that the activity or the effort that was required in that case. For example, if a farmer does not look after the seeds well enough of it, or he does not water the crop, or does not, nourish them with manure and other things, and he still expects that the crop should be resounding success, it would be overstretching on his part. It would not be correct. So you see, the needful effort must be done before you ask for God's help. Without that effort, God is in all probability not going to help. The second thing is that there are certain contingent things about which the Almighty says that unless you ask, I will not give. I mean, of course, if you will not ask, you will not be given those things. So it is important that though the Almighty is Himself going to accept a certain dua, or He may not accept it, but there are certain things about which it is known that unless you ask them, you will not be given them. So regardless of the results, we should keep on asking for the Almighty, or the Almighty for things that we need. And the third and the last thing in this regard is that if a certain dua is not accepted, then we know from a hadith of the Prophet that either it is deferred, or it is counted as a reward for you, or it is and that reward is given to you in the hereafter. So nevertheless, whatever happens, I mean, if it is not accepted, again, it is something for your own betterment. If it is delayed, then again, it would be done in a particular time that is suitable to you. And if none of these two happen, then dua itself will be a treasure of reward for you, because you expressed your feelings towards God. So in all these three cases, it's something that you should always do. So if you realize all these things, then you will be able to understand that for us, for every person to do dua, it is something that must be done. But at the same time, results might not be in accordance with that dua. So it could be because we have fallen short of the effort. It could be because the Almighty thinks that if He fulfills our dua, it would not be in our favor. And it could be that if He fulfills our dua, it could become a trial and test for us, and therefore He would defer that. So you see, all these aspects have to be kept in mind. But whatever happens, it is important to always bring the requests that we have in our mind and the pleading that we have before the Almighty. Because as I said, this itself is a form of worship. So just as when you say Alhamdulillah, it is expressing gratitude, and it's a form of your relationship with God. Similarly, when you are doing something bad and you repent, you say Astaghfirullah, that God, I repent. So just as these utterances, they bring you closer to God, whatever dua you make, I mean, that is bound to bring you closer to God, because you are expressing your need to no one else. You're not going to anyone else but God. So this in itself is a symbol of your trust in God, and it promotes those monotheistic feelings.
Thank you very much, Dr.
May I ask one quick question?
Is it a follow-up on the
Yes.
question? Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Is it also true that dua can change your qadr? So if Allah has written for you to not bear any children, but you make dua to Allah, Ya Allah, please give me a child, that Allah will override your qadr.
I mean, the short answer to this question is that we cannot know the answer to this question. I mean, whether dua can change something or not, how can we know that? I mean, we've not given this knowledge. All that we can say is that at times things get deferred, and at times they are given on time. But when we say that, for example, that dua is going to change our destiny, we can never know about that unless that thing happens, and then you look back in retrospect, in hindsight, and then you see, well, this happened, and my dua got accepted. So I always, I'm always, when I answer this question, or when I hear this question, I always have this mind that how can we ever know that? I mean, whether we have changed God's plans or not, this is something we could never have known unless maybe we are prophets of God who could have been told whatever happened. So in the absence of any such communication, we cannot simply say a yes or a no. All that we can say is that if our duas can either be accepted, or they can be delayed or deferred, or none of the two will happen, and we will get a reward for this. It would be an act of virtue that would be rewarded in the hereafter, simply because we were asking God and we were going to no one else.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem.
Thank you very much.
Nushat Shafqat, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Doctor. Doctor, my question relates to the meaning of the word jinn in Arabic, because I heard a scholar say
Mm,
that jinn refers to all those things that are not visible to us or that we do not know of. Not only the jinns that we normally think about. And this way he
mhm,
explained that in previous times where people fell mentally ill, people
mhm,
said, "Inko jinn aa gaya hai." They've come under the
mhm,
effect of a jinn.
mhm,
Is
mhm.
that interpretation correct of the word jinn, that it also includes those things which are not visible to us?
Well, strictly speaking, this is not true. Jinn are species like human beings, and we see from the Quran that they have very similar needs. For example, they need guidance. They need God's guidance, and in Surah Araf, it has been said that God has sent His messengers amongst jinn, just as He has sent messengers amongst human beings, which actually tell us that they will also have a reckoning on the day of judgment. They will be, they will have the same. I mean, the same procedure will be adopted, and then they would be rewarded or punished. Similarly, they have some powers which we know from the Quran also. That they can hear and see us, whereas we cannot see and hear them. And similarly, some other things as well. But all said and done, what we know with certainty is that they are a separate species. They are a genre in themselves. So human beings and jinn, and the third species that we know of are the angels. So these are the three species that exist, and they have sense and reason and awareness of good and evil. But other than that, for example, when we loosely say these words that someone has been under the influence of a jinn or maybe under some spell, so these are all esoteric happenings in which people are making conjectures and speculating that when certain things happen, for example, when a person uh, is overtaken with hysteria or some other psychological disease and is not willing to go to a doctor, then at times it gets worse, it worsens, and the situation which you can see on a person is as if that he is under some spell. So I think in that case the best thing is that you consult a doctor, a psychotherapist, or a psychiatrist, and see what psychological ailment that person has, and if that even cannot be solved, I mean, there could be other ailments that we have yet to discover. But and a third possibility which cannot be ruled out is that yes, I mean, some troublesome jinn, some miscreant is causing something in the minds or maybe in the physique of some human being. But this is something which is beyond the realm of religion. I mean, I cannot comment on that because this is something which the Quran does not inform us about. All that we know is that they are separate species and they can influence people. And the most strongest thing that they can do, which the Quran says, is that they can whisper evil suggestions into you, and they will lure you to evil. But whether they are psychologically affecting our psyche and making us turn mad, it is not the subject of religion. It is a subject of parapsychology, which in itself is a field. So parapsychological, uh, I would say, doctors or experts, they themselves are as yet at a loss to explain this phenomena. And one day maybe parapsychology does explain it, but other than that, as I said, as far as Quran is concerned, as scriptures are concerned, they have a very distinct picture to give us regarding the jinn, and they do not comment in any way on the situation that you have asked of. As I said, that's a purely parapsychological happening, and it is beyond the realm of religion. And maybe one day, through science or through any other instrument, we might be able to pinpoint it.
Thank you very much.
Safi, you're up next. Please go ahead.
I want to have a question about the hadith, that Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. So about these two books, especially the traditional scholars, usually some scholars are saying it's so authentic that as good as Quran or Sunnah, because our muhaddisin has
Hmm.
did a so good job that now it's almost authentic. And Ghamidi have also sometimes said that they really did a very good job. I just want to know that still, uh, I mean, in
Hmm.
your opinion or in your experience, in your knowledge, that still in any hadith from Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, we can consider that is not. It's not the authentic or it's not real saying of the Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, or no, it is, they are all authentic. Number one, just briefly, the part two of that question, that for example, there is one hadith in Sahih Bukhari that Hazrat Musa alayhi salam slapped the angel, angel of death, that why you come to me. And then another one, that there is one hadith that this Musa alayhi salam was going out of the Egypt, away from the Pharaoh, but and suddenly they can't find the place, and then somebody told me that Yusuf alayhi salam said, take my body from here. Then they went to the one old lady, and old lady said it is in the pond, and they dig the pond. So I was worried, I was concerned that how could it possible when they are running from Rasulullah and they have to do all those things. So these two hadiths look like very, according to the matan, if you're not of Ravi, little bit not accurate. So please comment on that. Thank you.
So see, first of all, there's a world of difference between the Quran and Hadith, and that can be summed up in just one sentence. The author of the Quran is the Almighty, and the author of Sahih Bukhari or any book of Hadith are human beings, and therefore, just as human error can creep into any book of a human being, so can it be in Bukhari or Muslim. So therefore, the two are not even comparable. They stand miles and poles apart, I would say. Basically, the Quran has been authored by God, and therefore nothing can rival it. Hadiths are basically collection of the prophetic sayings by people, and the way they understood them, and they added their own meaning to it as well. At times they misunderstood them, at times they misreported them, and so it was a whole chain of narration that came into being, and ultimately a compiler like Bukhari or Muslim or Ibn Majah, they started to record them. So to the best of their own ability, remember, to the best of their own ability, they try to research into those narratives and find out whether they were reliably traced back to the Prophet. So they did their job, but that doesn't mean that they are infallible or they have done a perfect job. They have tried to do what best they could, and it is for the later generations to revisit and reevaluate whatever they have written. But in no way can they be comparable to the Word of God. And the two narratives that you have cited speak volumes of this as well, that basically whatever they thought was reliably traced back to the Prophet, they just recorded. And regarding Bukhari himself, if you've heard of Ustad Ghamidi, he has commented on this a number of times, that contrary to Muslim, the Sahih of Imam Muslim, the Al-Jami Sahih of Imam Bukhari seems that he did not give it a final reading. So there are many discrepancies in Bukhari. For example, if you look at the title of the chapter and you look at the content, you'll find that the chapter heading is something else, and the content of that chapter is something else, which does seem that he was not able to give it a final reading. So it was like a semi-final book. It was not completely finished by him, but still he did a good job. But whatever job he did, it falls short of perfection, no matter what he would have done.
But what your comments on these two hadiths I mentioned? Do you think it look authentic?
I don't think none of them is satisfies the norms of hadith literature, judging this hadith literature. And enough work has been done on both these narratives. You can look up both these narratives, that they have been criticized by authorities.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our next question asks, is octopus halal?
Let me give you the principle of which can be used by any person to apply it on seafood. So you see, any sea animal which is carnivorous in nature, that tears apart its prey and uses its fangs or its teeth to tear apart its prey and eat it, would not be allowed. So to give you a very stark example, the shark, for example, it tears apart its prey through its teeth, and it's like a carnivore. It's like a savage beast. So this is something which has been outlined for land animals. So any of these traits, if this is found in sea animals, they would also stand prohibited. So if an octopus tears apart its prey and it eats its meat like a savage animal does, for example, a lion or a tiger. So for the very reason lions and tigers are prohibited is this, that they act as savage beasts and they tear apart their prey and eat their meat. So the reason for all this, if I take a step behind to look at the philosophy, is that basically the food we eat has an influence on our habits. And we don't eat the food of carnivores, we don't eat the food of savage beasts, because then their disposition somehow over a period of time has an impact on our own disposition as well. So this is the philosophy, that food which is amenable, food which is conducive to our own positive habits, only that food is allowed. And for that very reason, food of savage beasts is not allowed. So we know that the principle of those savage beasts, the way it has been described for land animals. So any of these traits, if they also exist in sea animals, then they would be analogously regarded to be prohibited. So you can make up your own mind. If the octopus, you do some research. I haven't eaten an octopus ever in my life, or studied it for that matter. But if this is how an octopus does, that it tears apart its prey, either through its instruments that it has on its fangs, or maybe the teeth that it might have, then it should not be regarded as allowable.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Our next question asks, it's always the person using his choice to do a sin, and also on the day of judgment, God will punish the sinner, not the sin. How is the philosophy that hate the sin but not the sinner correct and valid?
This is just for this world. It's not valid for the next world. When we say you hate the sin and not the sinner, it actually means that you try to reform that person, try to come closer to that person, instead of hating him or her, instead of isolating yourself, instead of regarding that person to be mean, or making him feel that you have done a very wrong thing. It should be a means to bring you even more closer to him, because if he is doing something bad, then should not be hated for that, because he needs your help so that he can come out of it. And precisely this is what Jesus once said when people saw him sitting with evil people, and they said that, why are you sitting with such evil people and evil men? And he said that, those historic words, and he said that, I have not been sent to the righteous, I've been sent to the sinners. This is the context, that when you see that people are in some deep sin, then instead of hating those people, you try to bring yourself closer to them. And if you have to hate anything, it is the sin that they are doing, not they themselves, because they are human beings who God has created. They are, so to speak, God's children, and you need to get closer to them to make a positive impact on them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Shabnam, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mariam. Sir, very short question. शुरू में ये अभी रफिया साहबा ने क्वेश्चन किया था, वो जो इंसिडेंट हुआ इक्रा में. सर, वेरी ब्रीफली आई वुड लाइक टू नो कि सर, क्या ये हमारे पार्ट पे, जिस तरह की हमारी पब्लिक है या इमोशंस हैं, सर क्या ये डिजायरेबल नहीं कि कुरानिक आयात से मिलती जुलती चीजें अवॉइड की जाए पढ़ने से?
Yes, I would say so. I mean, if in such an ignorant society, in such a society in which foolish people they live in abundance, maybe people should be more cautious and they should not do this. I mean, not that it is wrong to do it, only that you have to save your own skin from people who are totally ignorant.
Sir, many sorry, Mariam, कर लूं follow-up question?
हाँ जी.
Sir, कुछ पिक्चर्स थी जो उसी ब्रांड की थी, सऊदी अरब के ब्रांड की थी, जिसका वो ड्रेस था, जिसमें कुछ ड्रेसेस ऐसे थे जो कि लिटरली डिस्टिंग्विश करना मुश्किल था कि वो कुरान की कोई आयत है या उन्होंने वैसे अरेबिक लिखी हुई है, इतना ज्यादा उनका.
We have to understand that in Arabia everyone knows Arabic, so when the Arabs they know. So if anyone would be having some etching done through of Arabic words, everyone who is conversant with the Arabic language would immediately know whether it's the Quran or some ordinary Arabic sentence. So remember, the brand, wherever the brand originated from, it belonged to people who very well knew this. And unfortunately, this girl or this woman who was wearing these clothes, wherever she bought them from, she came to a country in which people think that whatever is written in Arabic, even if it's an abuse or something which is not even good in its own original form, whenever something is seen in Arabic, they have this feeling that it is the verse of the Quran. So it's basically gross ignorance. Right, but not in Arabia. In the Arab, in Arabia, in Arab, the Arabs, they very well know that because they can read whatever is written on that.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir.
Mujahid Khan, you're up next. Please go ahead.
या डॉक्टर खालिद जहीर साहब का मैं एक लेक्चर सुन रहा था, तो वो जिक्र के बारे में बात कर रहे थे, अल्लाह के जिक्र के बारे में। तो उन्होंने इसमें एक बात ये कही थी कि इंसान उसी का जिक्र करता है जिससे वो मिलता है। जैसा कि मतलब कोई दोस्त हो, फॉर एग्जाम्पल मैं आपसे मिला नहीं हूँ तो मैं आपका जिक्र नहीं करूँ, ठीक है। अगर मैं आपसे एक बार मिल लिया तो मैं कहूंगा भाई कि शहजाद सलीम साहब ऐसे हैं, जो भी हैं। तो वो ये कह रहे थे कि अल्लाह के जिक्र से हमें सुकून इसलिए मिलता है क्योंकि हमारी अल्लाह से मुलाकात हो चुकी है पहले। जैसा कि जो अहद अलस्त का वाक़या है कि अल्लाह ने सबसे मतलब ये लिया कि मैं तुम्हारा रब नहीं हूँ। तो फिर वो बोल रहे थे कि मतलब इंसान के दिल में या बॉडी में कहीं तो भी एक जगह है जहाँ पे अल्लाह की याद छुपी हुई है। और जब आप अल्लाह को याद करते हो तो लाइक दैट्स व्हाई यू गेट सेटिस्फैक्शन। और जो सूफिया भी तो यही बोलते हैं कि अल्लाह की कोई चीज है जो आपके दिल के अंदर छुपी हुई है, और लाइक या समथिंग सिमिलर। तो अब इसमें क्या डिफरेंस है? मतलब जो सूफिया बोलते हैं कि भाई खुदा तुम में है, मतलब नॉट एग्जैक्टली खुदा या खुदा की याद बोल सकते हैं, कुछ तो भी जो तुम्हारे दिल के अंदर है। या फिर जो हदीस है वो बोलती है कि खुदा तुम्हारे शेरक से करीब है, right? So like
there's a world. I understand. There's a world of difference between these two. So you see, Sufism or mysticism is a philosophy as per which God has descended in the form of a human shape. I mean, basically, it is His manifestation in human shape, and it is very close to polytheism and shirk for that matter. But what Dr. Khalid Zahir was probably saying was the fact that every person has a spiritual part in himself. So just as we are physically, made of flesh, we also have a soul, and that's the fodder of that soul, or the food of that soul, is God's remembrance. So just as our physical body needs food and drinks to sustain itself, our spiritual body or our spiritual existence needs that connection with God. So that is probably what he was saying. But this is entirely different from the Sufistic or the mystic philosophy, in which they say that it's not that your spiritual soul is in need of God, it has that need for God connection. They say, in fact, that this universe and the people who are part of it, the Almighty has descended into them, So that is how they define this philosophy, because the basic problem is the creation of this universe. That how was this universe created from nothingness? So the philosophy of Wahdatul Wujud actually dates back to this age-old question that if this universe came out of nothingness, then you cannot imagine nothingness creating something. So this was a philosophical question that was faced by mystics, and they had to come up with an answer, because when the Quran says Badi'us samawati wal ard, that this universe was created out of nothing. So to create something out of nothing is scientifically, something of a question. Science is unable to come to grips. So in order to pacify these scientists, they had to bring up in this alternative, that how can something come out of nothingness? So the answer that they gave was that they did not come, this universe did not come out of nothingness. Basically, it was God who descended in the form of this universe. So this Wahdatul Wujud is basically something which counters this philosophy which the Quran says, or it tries to explain what the Quran says, that how can something be created out of nothingness? Nothingness and then something. So they said that, well, it was actually God, and then God descended or diluted himself, or whatever name that you can call this process, and he manifested himself in the form of this universe. So this is an entirely different philosophy. But as I said, what Dr. Khalid was probably speaking of was that every person has this spiritual existence, and in that spiritual existence, he connects with God. And that is, he was probably talking about that God connection, and not that you have, yourselves are God's manifestations. And the thing that you said, that God is near you than your own life vein, it's just a metaphor to explain how close God is to you, how you can immediately communicate to him. You don't need any intercession. You don't need to go to someone to talk to him. He's as close to you as your life vein. It's an expression to tell you that he is very, very accessible. That is all that it means.
Mustafa Azam, please go ahead. And for the remaining participants, please try to keep your questions concise. Thank you.
Okay, with regards to the companion who came to the Prophet and said, uh, if somebody desires to ask for any public office, it is either he wants to take undue advantage or he's ignorant of his duties. So asking or desiring for the public office prohibited in Islam or what?
Yes, I mean, it is not a good thing. When you're asking for public office, it does mean that you have some greed associated with it. So, a better way is that you present your services and, I mean, let people decide. I mean, and there's a difference between coveting something, having a greed for public office. So, basically, what the Prophet was prohibiting was that if you have that greed in asking, then you're not going to be responsible enough. You're not going to do your due as an officer. It would mean that you have some other ulterior motives as well. So there's a difference between presenting yourself as a responsible person, if someone would like to do so, and for a person who is greedily hiding that desire and would use it as a stepping stone to gain some public recognition and then
I
use it
was
for his own.
asking with regards to giving the exam. For example, I am preparing for the exam to get the office. Is this it's a
No,
desire
no,
also
no.
because I am preparing for that.
Absolutely, this is entirely different. I mean, if you're giving an exam, you are not desiring a public office in the sense that desire is negative or that you're going to barely use it for your own interest and purpose. This is an entirely different thing. You are just trying to prove yourself on merit, whether you qualify for that or not. You see, when you're given an exam, that exam is going to test you whether you are a suitable candidate for that office or not. So it's just a
So,
test that is going to
so
make you qualify.
it's a perfect to give the exam. And then secondly, another hadith says that if you spend 1 hour in the office, it's better than prepare. Praying for the entire day or fasting for the entire day. It's also
There
an
is
hadith.
no such authentic hadith.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Asifadi, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab. So my question is related to the Ummat and Wasata in Surah Al-Baqarah, because is it a status, or because there are Sunni Islam believes that it's like Muslim Ummah or the Muslims or Ishmaelites, so to say. But when it
Please go ahead.
But when it comes to the Shia Muslims, they said that although they come from the Imam basically mindset, but they say that since it is a status, though it can't be the every person who is a sinful or whatever, but it is mainly the Imams. So what is your view on that?
I mean, I don't need to express my view because the Quran itself has given its view very clearly, and it has said that by addressing the Sahaba who were in the times of the Prophet, right, standing there in front of the Quran, it was telling them, "Kazalika ja'alnakum ummatum wasatan litakun." Ummatan, yani, we have made you, yani, which means that the Almighty is telling the Sahaba that we have made you a bridge community, a community which is an intermediate community. So, and why is that so? Because it is the Prophet who has borne witness to them. It is not the Prophet who had borne witness to later generations. It is the Prophet who has borne witness to the truth to these Sahaba. So they are the intermediate community, no one else. And in there, it is also in their collective capacity that they are called Ummat-e-Wasat. It's not individually. So as a community, the Prophet bore witness to the religion of truth to them, and they accepted that. And they also, in return, bore this witness to other people of the world. So the reason that they are called the intermediate community is that on one side is God and His Prophet who conveyed this truth to them, the Sahaba. And on the other side are the rest of the nations of the world, because now they, as the intermediate community who has received this religion from God, are now required to transfer it to the rest of the world. So that is the meaning of Ummat-e-Wasat. So it's not anything else, but the exact meaning would be the intermediate community, something that lies in between, like a bridge. So it's receiving something from God and His Prophet and then transferring it to the rest of the world. And that is why they are called this. I mean, just regarding the Imams to be the intermediate community would not be correct, and it would also be against the linguistics of the Arabic language. It's not specifying a few individuals, it's specifying the Sahaba as a whole. So the Arabic words are وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ وَيَكُونَ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. So that people to whom this testimony is given, they are able to bear testimony to this religion to the rest of the world. وَيَكُونُ رَسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا, and the messenger of God, of course, who is standing amongst them, is bearing witness to this religion to them. So basically, it is not talking about anyone else but the community or the group of the Sahaba themselves.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our next question comes from Bisma Tirmizi Ahmed. Please go ahead.
Assalamualaikum, Dr. Saleem. My question is, in these times, so many people, all of us live in the West, and obviously everything is owned by somehow Jews control it. How does one combat virtue signaling and self-righteousness by people who accuse us of saying it, everything that you guys earn and everything that you guys use, is owned by the Jews? And how does one supposed to combat? Is there anything that the Prophet has said that I can, a story that I can say that this is not how it is? What is one supposed to do?
I mean, this is something which is not related to Prophet in any way. I mean, any group of people who become adept in certain things because of their ability, because of their effort, because of their God-gifted mind, and they start to control the world. I mean, it is something which can happen to any shrewd and any intelligent community. And we have to accept that basically the Jews, they are a very, very intelligent community, and they have a very perspicacious mind in general. And of course, there are exceptions as well. And they do control a lot of things in the world. They control the United States, to speak. They control the media. They have so many other things at their hand, and they are super intelligent as well. So if they do so, and they are controlling the world, it is not by, I mean, yes, there are instances in which they connive maybe or conspire, but that is another thing. Basically, I think it is on merit. I mean, they have this capability of doing it, and once they acquire that ability, they have sustained it through hook or by crook. So I think acknowledging them is something that has to be done. And if you're saying that why are you using Jewish products, well, I would say that why not? I mean, not all Jews are the same. Not everyone is a Zionist. Not everyone is a terrorist. Not everyone is in favor of what's going on in Gaza at this time. I mean, it's this is. I don't find any correlation with these two.
That's exactly how I choose to respond. But it is very hard, when you're living abroad. Everything that you do.
I would suggest, yes, that in such a situation, it's better to ignore such people. Just divert the conversation to some other topic like the weather or maybe something else, because you see, people are very emotionally charged when they discuss this topic, and I have learned from experience that it's not. I mean, you have to pick and choose your audience to give your view. It's not that you have to give your view whatever the audience is. I mean, there are so many people who become they are charged with emotions when this topic comes to discussion. So I rather would not take part in this discussion, or maybe just politely deflect it to some other topic. Because you see, unless people are willing to hear the voice of reason, you cannot debate with them.
So it should remain okay if, like, say, it's very easy for people to accuse. Sometimes I feel like, it's like almost like we're accused of.
Let them. I mean, the best way is to reply, not to reply to them, just smile at them politely and just deflect the whole situation. It's no use answering them because, I mean, as I said, I mean, they have closed their mind, they have made up their mind, they have decided what to do. So any person who has done that, you'll not be able to get across to that person.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Our next question asks, regarding women covering their head and hair completely before praying Salah, is there a connection between Surah Nur versus where Allah asks women to cover up?
No, that is not. So it's just etiquette. It's just a recommendation. It's not even something which is which I would say is an obligation. It's a highly regarded, recommended thing. But if, for example, if they do not do so, this is not something which they would be doing wrong. As I said, it's like saying that when it's like a uniform that you wear when you go to God's presence. So just as you wear a uniform when you enter a school or maybe any place that has a particular decorum. So this is like a decorum that you go before God by in covering your head, and that is all.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Akram Bhatti, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. So I just want to give a positive spin that to that thing that happened in Pakistan about that woman. Why don't we learn from it that how important it is for us to teach our kids Arabic? They can. If it seemed like they were so illiterate that they some words were like the word I saw was like Urdu word. So they were illiterate people, and then when mob gets together, they're so stupid. So I think we should learn from it instead of just negating it, criticizing it. That how important it is to learn the Arabic language.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. That as a target, we should, set this target before our children. But you see, the problem here is that unless there is some need associated with some language, people will not learn it. Either you make it, just as your national language, the language in which you are born is Urdu, maybe in Pakistan, in English when you are in some other country. So unless some language is made your national language, people will not learn it because you see, they don't see any utility. All they can see is if their parents can really inspire them that the greatest utility in learning Arabic is to understand the Quran directly. And this is something that should be actually emphasized on our children and in our schools. If the curriculum is made such that in those 10 years or 12 years, until they pass their high school, the curriculum is made in such a way that in these 11 or 12 years, they are connected to the Book of God through Arabic. That is the only way in which we can bring our children closer, because in that case, they'll need to give an exam and they need to pass an exam. And when you do so, you have to pass an exam, you always prepare well. So if you make it just an inspiration for them, some of them might do it, some of them might not do it. But if you make it part of their curriculum, in which they are given exams and their passing percentage affects them, only then perhaps it will be effective. And of course, the incentive that should be given to them as well is that they should understand that the Book of God is in this language. And if you are able to understand the Book of God directly without having any recourse to its translation, it is going to have a tremendous impact on your spiritual life. So these are some things that can be targeted.
So it's a need. I think this is a need. This should be a need of Muslim society. Like, what if somebody had killed the woman? That would probably reflect on all our society that how ignorant we are from Quran. So that's the only comment I want to make. That let's give us a positive spin to it. That how important it is to teach our kids.
You can use this incident, as you said, you give a positive spin to it by making people realize that it is just because of not knowing the Arabic language, people went as far as to take the life of that girl.
Thank you very much. Ron Nashur, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. I have another question about the concept of dreams in Islam, because we know from the Hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that there are 3 types of dreams: the dreams from yourself, the dreams from Shaitan, and the dreams from God Himself. And my question was, how can we differentiate and interpret the dreams from God? Because sometimes you, for example, pray istikhara for a sign, and they say that you can also get a sign.
We can never be sure of that, because you see, for that we have to be a prophet of God to be sure of that, because we don't have any communication from God. To be sure whether a dream is from God or not can only be seen in hindsight, and that is that you saw a dream and it actually came true. After it coming true, you can say yes, it was from God because it was a true dream. So before it happens, you just cannot have any knowledge of that, because for that you need God's communication for that I've shown you a true dream. And this only happens with prophets of God. For the rest of us, we can only tell whether a dream is true or not, whether it's good or not, or it's from God or not, once it has happened. So we can see in hindsight, we look back and we can now make this value judgment that the dream that I saw 5 days ago or a month ago has come true, and it all purposes, or perhaps it was from God. So this is the only barometer that we have.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. We're out of time, but we have 2 more questions left. If you don't mind, we could take them.
Please go ahead.
Noshad Shafkat, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Dr. Saab, my question is with regard to the recitation of the Quran during namaz. It is said that we need to recite in the first rakat a particular piece of Quran, and in the next rakat we have to recite something which is after that in the Quran. Like, for example, if I'm reading Surah Baqarah
I
and
understand. But you have to
yes,
follow the order of the Quran. This is no such thing. I mean, this is just a suggestion that some scholars give. Otherwise, nothing from the Prophet. I mean, so therefore, you're free to choose from any portion, whether it's before that portion that you already read or after that.
that's a very, very great release, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bismillah Mirza Ahmed, please go ahead.
So, Dr. Saleem, the Prophet had said that only Allah can be worshipped in the land of Arabia, and now the Arab Peninsula has a big temple, the biggest temple in the world, made by the Hindus in Abu Dhabi. Are we openly rejecting God's will, or is it something just because it's modern times and obviously we also have our worship places in the West and in India? How are we supposed to combat that? Are we what are we supposed to do?
You see, this depends on the understanding that you have regarding the Arabian Peninsula.
Okay.
If your understanding is that it's a place which is the center of monotheism and no other religion can be there publicly the way it has just been seen, yes, it would be a wrong thing to do. But the question is that people who are doing it, whether they also believe this or not. So you see, a person is going to be held accountable according to what he or she would believe. If people have wrongly understood this and they think that it is fine to build a temple, just as you can build temples in other Muslim countries, so you can have a temple here as well. If this is how they have understood, yes, of course, it's a wrong understanding. But if this is something that they have sincerely understood, then of course that's a different thing. So you see, people are going to be held accountable according to what they understand. If you ask me, if you ask some other person, we could have a difference of an opinion. And if you ask people who are doing that, and they could have their own opinion. But if you ask me, I will say this for sure, that as far as the Arabian Peninsula is concerned, it was to be a mark of monotheism. It was a center of monotheism. It was made to be a center of monotheism. In all other Muslim countries, you can build temples and churches and synagogues and all sorts of worship places. But the only place where you have to just build mosques and make them a symbol of monotheism is the Arabian Peninsula. And having said that, this doesn't mean that you cannot have a prayer place or a temple or a church-like prayer place in there, because you see, you have ambassadors who are going to settle there. You have people who live there. So what can be done is to give them temporary prayer places in which they can pray, because it's part of their religion, but not a public place like a temple. So it's like a prayer place is something else, and a temple or a synagogue or a declared prayer place is something else. So a declared prayer place is something which should not be given, but in their own offices maybe, or in their own communities, wherever you can give them that space, of course, that would be always provided, but not a big temple the way they are being built. But this is just, and remember, this is just the case with the Arabian Peninsula, because God first wanted the area of Palestine to have that signification that it should be a center of monotheism. And once it was taken away from the Israelites and the responsibility was consigned to the Ishmaelites, the same status was given or imposed on the Arabian Peninsula. But for the rest of the world, all Muslim countries can have all sorts of prayer places, big ones or very big ones. That doesn't matter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem, and thank you all a lot to the participants for coming through today and asking great questions. We had a nice turnout today, and thank you, Dr. Saleem, for taking the time to clarify a lot of these questions that bother us on a daily basis and expanding our knowledge. So with that being said, inshallah, see you tomorrow in another series. And until then, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And for those of you who did not get to finish asking your questions, you may join some of the other sessions that we go over. So like the misconceptions, common misconceptions session, or the textual study of the Quran session, or the Islam study circle, where you can ask off-topic questions towards the end of this series. So with that being said, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. See you tomorrow.